welcome back to the Access Vikings podcast. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues Ben Goessling and Andrew Krammer. Ben is back with us after a few days off, and we are wrapping up the Sunday loss to the Bears at US Bank Stadium as we start off the new week and begin to look forward towards Sunday's road trip to the Packers, back-to-back NFC North games in this 2-week span. Ben, you were not with Andrew and I on Sunday.
Yeah.
I guess just what takeaways do you have from that game as you were watching from home and what happened there, particularly maybe with J.J. McCarthy?
Well, I think it was – the thing I noticed during the game, hearing with the broadcast, is the ways that they changed the cadence to really simplify it. It was very much – and Kevin O'Connell said it after the game, was basically set hut. I mean, that's kind of what it sounded like on TV. But just the number of times where you see guys running open – and there are throws there to be had. This question of, do they need to make the offense simpler for him? I think sometimes if you have a guy running open over the middle of the field, you don't need to simplify it. I mean, that should be simple enough to be able to make the throw. It's not a need of, hey, let's have a quick game, kind of shorter passing kind of stuff. If a guy is open and you see it and throw it, that should be a relatively accessible throw for a young guy. So there was a lot of that, I think, and a lot of that is just being. I mean, we've heard a lot about mechanics, but some of it is just settling down enough. You saw the clip; everybody's seen it by now of Justin Jefferson basically saying to McCarthy, "Relax." So I think there's a lot of that where, especially in that environment where maybe fans are getting a little unrest, starting to have a little bit of unrest for obvious reasons. You wonder how much that is just playing into the overall, and maybe the anxiety that McCarthy has too, of just I have to go out and perform and competitive juices start flying. And I think there's a lot of moments where just being able to calm the whole thing down would go a long way. I think you saw a lot of that on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, QB development's just going to be the conversation here for the rest of the season with the Vikings. So if you're getting tired of it, I don't know what to tell you. It's just going to be the name of the game.
Follow a team that doesn't have a 22-year-old quarterback?
Right, yeah. I think it's interesting. We'll get into, obviously, Jordan Love a little bit later in this episode. That's a guy who's a few years into his development now, and I think is interesting here's what this could look like 3 years down the line, maybe. But another young quarterback we talked about in the locker room with Adam Thielen on Monday was Bryce Young and Thielen's time with him. Andrew, what did Adam say just kind of about that and his relationship with young quarterbacks?
Yeah, it just struck me when Adam obviously played with Bryce Young for 2 years in Carolina, and Adam was talking in the locker room just about McCarthy first off, and just talking about the experience he needs and how you can't learn all these things in practices all the time in terms of just when to get the ball out, the feeling of the rush. Ben, you asked O'Connell about that today. Like, we've heard many quarterbacks talk about how difficult, especially Kirk, I remember, about how difficult it is to get a feel for the rush and how good your offensive line is or isn't in practice when you have that red no-contact jersey on. So Thielen was talking about all that and saying, like, you just got to get in games. So I decided to ask him, like, well, obviously you played with Bryce Young. Like, do you see a parallel there? And he said, yeah, look at what Bryce is doing now. 38 starts into his career, guiding now a winning Panthers team at 6-5. Obviously not a team that's as talented around him as J.J. McCarthy has here in Minnesota. But 2.5 years now into his career, you're seeing some of the benefits, the fruits of his labor, in which McCarthy 5 starts in at 22 years old is showing just how raw he is, the inconsistency. I think that's the word O'Connell keeps going back to, is we just need consistency, routine, find things we can hang our hat on that is going to be good about this offense that we can turn back to and build off of. And right now they're just still searching for those things. And the Panthers were searching for those things with Bryce Young for years, and it seemed lost. He was called a bust. He was called everything under the sun. And McCarthy's kind of feeling that weight right now too.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of this process, and we could talk about Bryce Young. We could talk about the quarterback that is at the top of that division, that was the number 1 pick in the draft in Cleveland and busted out there and was basically left for dead until the Buccaneers signed him, and now he's got them in position to go back to the playoffs after they made a run last year in the playoffs. So you see, or we'll talk about the quarterback that we're going to see next week in Seattle that resurrected his career in Minnesota last year, Sam Darnold, of course. So there's just a lot of this stuff that takes time, and we keep saying it. I know as fans are going through it, it's probably not a lot of fun because this was a team that was built to win this year. This was not a 3-year project in terms of some of the deals they signed. it was, if you're signing Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, you are thinking you're going to win this year. That was an ambitious goal of, can you win with a veteran team and a young quarterback, and can those two things work at the same time? So far they have not, but the most important of those two things is the development of the quarterback. Even more so than winning this year, you have to figure out the quarterback situation for the long term, and I think it probably is just going to mean riding this out for a little bit, at least till you see, or to have a definitive answer of yes, he's the guy, or no, we have to go figure something else out.
The other thing that's kind of popped up through the beginning part of the week off that Sunday game was, of course, how it ended, because J.J. McCarthy does have a great 2-minute drill drive. He takes them down there. He finally connects with Jordan Addison on a key 4th down, and then on the touchdown there, that gives them the lead. And then the special teams unit, which Matt Daniels, special teams coordinator, talked yesterday about how good they've been this season on kickoff returns, has a bad one and allows, I think, 56 yards from Devin Duvernay to help set up that Bears game-winning field goal. And, Matt Daniels was you could tell he was pretty upset about it as he talked about it yesterday. He said guys got greedy. He said that guys were abandoning their assignments in favor of trying to make the plays. And Kevin O'Connell had said that on Monday, too, at one point in response to a question about the kickoff of, sometimes guys want to win so bad that they forget that their discipline is how we're going to win, and they want to go make the play and stuff. And I know Tyler Batty talked to our colleague Mark Craig in the locker room, said that a couple of the younger guys there, I think Ty Felton was one of them, abandoned some of their lanes on that kick, and it just got messy. But that's a blemish on a part of Matt Daniels' unit this year that I think he is not going to take lightly. But he also said, I'm not going to change a bunch going out there because we have had a good run. It's just we need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and the theme of that stood out to me was what O'Connell said Monday, where he said it seemed like guys on that play, as you mentioned, were pressing, like trying to make a play. And O'Connell said, I think there's a lot of that going on our team.
I would agree with that.
Offense, defense, special teams, where guys feel like they need to make that extra effort to make a play. With how thin their margin for error is, with how inconsistent the quarterback play has been, that pressing and doing that is getting guys out of lanes, leading to issues that ultimately lead to losing games.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about pressing, the quarterback is probably pressing a little bit too. So trying to figure out how to not play that way, that's when Justin Jefferson says relax. I think that's, some of it for him as well, in the sense of you don't have to solve all of this at once. Just take we've heard Kevin O'Connell say it, the power of completions. Mm-hmm. Take the 7-yard completion, and it's 2nd and 3. It's not 2nd and 10. You don't have to make the hero play all the time.
Yeah. This just came to mind. I'll pose it to you, Andrew. I mean, the takeaways and the lack of takeaways, I guess, for the defense has continued to come up. Do we think that the pressing issue plays into that at all on the defensive side? Maybe because there have been tips and stuff like that. Are they trying to make too big of plays with trying to get those turnovers rather than just securing the turnover?
Yeah, and I think that might be more of an issue with some of the things we've seen sporadically throughout the year in terms of missed tackles. Mm-hmm. There certainly have been issues of over pursuing, missed tackles. Like Blake Cashman talked about after the game about how the Bears were not a big weak dive team, and the Bears started doing that where they realized they were going to blitz the strong side gaps, B gaps, and so the Bears were going to be handing off to the opposite side. You could tell in the second half, Blake started over pursuing some of those where he was guessing that was what they were going to do, and then they came back the other way. Stuff like that, where I think the small microcosm, little lane stuff really plays into it. The over pursuing angles that lead to missed tackles, that stuff. To me, though, some of it's just dumb luck. It's also opportunity. They have not had a ton of teams throw on them. We keep mentioning this. They don't get leads. They don't force teams to throw. And then their inconsistent run defense allows teams to just say, you know what, we're just going to hand it off. Like DeAndre Swift's not great, but 21 carries for 90 yards is enough because you're not going to do enough on offense.
And they held the ball for 36 minutes or something.
Yeah, and then the teams can do that, whether it's Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, or the Steelers. If they can find a way to get the ground game and the quick passing game going, this defense cannot seize on its opportunities because there just aren't many to seize on. And you're right, the tip passes, DeAndre Swift dropping a handoff deep in his own territory, those are the times that they need to pounce on him. But as O'Connell mentioned today, the oblong football that they often talk about just bounces the wrong way.
Yeah, for sure. We heard from O'Connell earlier that Jonathan Grenard is going to be working out on a side field at least today, and then Ryan Kelly will be a full participant. Sounds like hopefully the full week is the plan with him. Today, Wednesday, they are only doing a walkthrough. They decided to forego practice today, just doing a walkthrough. So those statuses or estimations when they release later today. But this could be one of the first times, well, it's not the first time, but the first time in a long time that this Vikings team has the O-line it envisioned.
This would be the first time.
I guess it would,
Yes.
because Christian Darrisaw was not in the early games that Ryan Kelly
They have
came.
not had a snap with the 5 they envisioned
Ooh.
all year.
Yeah, well, what do we think that's going to do for this team if it happens?
I mean, it's what they've wanted to see, right? I mean, I think Ryan Kelly working with J.J. McCarthy was the hope.
Yeah.
Then makes it easier for Donovan Jackson. Donovan Jackson really has played awfully well. And I think as we talk about first-round picks, it's not the equivalent of hitting on the quarterback and the edge rusher that you took in 24. But I'm sure Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is probably like, hey, everybody rags on my first-round picks, but that one looks like it's okay at the moment. So, yeah, I think having that group, especially going to Lambeau Field, is what they want. We'll see if it's Ryan Kelly on Sunday. I would think if he gets a full week of practice, it probably is. But, yeah, I mean, the ability to set protections and figure out what you're doing, especially against this team where Micah Parsons and where he is and Rashawn Gary kind of playing off of that is always going to be something you have to be aware of. Kelly's veteran experience there probably is something they want.
Yeah, but you're right, I can't believe it. This would be week 12?
Yes.
And this would be the first time they've had the 5 offensive linemen they envisioned all summer playing in front of J.J. McCarthy, finally now in his 6th start, getting out there and playing in front of him.
How many snaps in training camp did that happen?
Yeah, not many, because Darrisaw was rotating in and out on days.
Yeah.
Kelly had like an elbow thing for a while.
Yep. So, yeah, not even in camp they practiced together that often.
There were probably a few, but a few snaps. But I don't think you would
and then certainly not
need all of our hands to count them all.
No, yeah, and certainly not the full offense, too, because then Jefferson was out, and, they just haven't had everybody together as an offense.
Ships passing in the night.
Well, and obviously the cadence issues were cleaned up a bit since the Ravens game. They only had one false start, albeit it was a costly false start again on Sunday. But I just think I'm curious to see how much having the veteran that Ryan Kelly is back in there to help with some of the protection stuff and maybe taking a little bit off of JJ's plate can just aid him in coming out, because I think that's the big thing at this point. It's they leaned heavier on the run game on Sunday, which is I think something they need to continue doing. Aaron Jones should be getting above 15 carries every single game, or at least the combination of him and Jordan Mason should be getting above 30, I would say, to just be taking things off JJ's plate so that when there's the moments that you do need to call on him, whether it's a super elaborate play or not, he has the confidence in the offense and all of that to be able to just go and execute that play.
Yeah, and it's maybe not as high leverage of a play. I mean, it's an opportunity possibly, but you're not sitting there saying, okay, it's 3rd and 9 all the time. I think that's where the run game, that was the idea that you could help there, is that you put him in 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 1 has been a issue of its own, but more of those types of settings where it's not needing to go make a dramatic play and let a long developing route happen where you're trying to fight through possibly a pass rush, figuring out blitzes, all those kinds of things. I think a lot of the hope was that you help him with a lot of the things that they did last Sunday and probably will try to do again. It's just you need to consistently do those things, and then when he has chances, he needs to be able to just make the play with a calm mind and a solid set of mechanics.
Yeah, and the calm part's the thing that jumps out to me with Ryan Kelly, because we heard all summer about guys talking about how he's a calming presence in the huddle, in the meeting room, all that stuff. In terms of, and Brian O'Neill talked about, he can see something so complex, and typically if you understand something well, a complex issue, you can distill it and make it sound so simply, and just, one sentence, whatever. And he said Ryan can do that with offensive schemes, with offensive line protections, all those things. But the biggest thing is that he talked about, Kelly did, about how with quarterbacks, he kind of took it upon himself to raise this young 22-year-old quarterback in JJ as a guy who needed to know how to act as the leader of a team, as the leader of a huddle, how to speak at the line of scrimmage, all these different things that then suddenly when McCarthy got to his first start, Ryan Kelly was there, but by his second start he wasn't. And then he wasn't again, obviously, later on when he returned from the high ankle sprain. So I think not having Ryan Kelly certainly hasn't helped issues with J.J. McCarthy being so up and down in terms of his emotions, in terms of just being too hyped at times. I do think Ryan's a guy who's comfortable enough to speak up, maybe grab him by the chest a little bit and tell him, hey, calm down. It's going to be all right. I know Jefferson has done that on the sideline, but in games, in the huddle, I think Kelly's a guy who can help him do that.
Well, it's part of the reason they brought him in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole reason they say Garrett Bradbury, who's been here and knows the offense well, we're moving on. Kelly's bigger. I mean, that's part of it too. He's a bigger physical presence in the middle of that line. But the guy that had been, I mean, you wrote about it before the season, the guy that had been with Phillip Rivers, the guy that has known how to work with quarterbacks based on being around some experienced guys, probably back to Andrew Luck too, I think. But they wanted his presence for that reason. So that's one of the ways it's going to have to be a factor now.
Let's go ahead and spend a few minutes wrapping up talking about the Packers. Obviously, we mentioned a little bit Jordan Love. This is a guy who's a few years into his career leading the Packers now. Started out having 2 seasons learning behind Aaron Rodgers, having Aaron Jones there. That's something that Aaron Jones and I talked a little bit about post-game the other day. But how have you guys, I mean, obviously being here covering the NFC North, kind of seen Jordan Love develop over the few years that he's been leading that team?
Well, I think those first couple of years, and we saw it, I think, in 23, that start he made. He was coming off an injury, I think a knee injury, when the Vikings beat him at Lambeau Field right before Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles. I mean, they were ahead big in that game at the time. Love in the games that I've seen him this year has looked a lot better, looked more decisive. I think the reads have been more assertive. I mean, they played a lot of kind of backyard football with him early where it was chuck it deep. I remember hearing people say, part of their offense was to throw it and hope they get a flag downfield early on in his tenure, which is not the way they played with Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Yeah. So I think he certainly seems like he's playing a little more in the rhythm and timing of that offense, which is, we hear Kevin O'Connell say that, but Matt LaFleur is from a very similar school. So having throws that come out on time, that routes that declare when you're at the top of your drop and you can get there and read it and go, is part of how they want to play. I think he's been better at that this year in the games that I've seen than what I recall seeing a couple of years ago, especially early in the season when they were just killing people. That was a pretty noticeable piece of it, that he knew the offense, he knew where he wanted to go with the ball, and he was making throws on time more often. I think the fact that they haven't had Tucker Kraft now because of that ACL has made a big difference. I think he was kind of becoming the go-to, because that's been the question with them is, do they have a go-to receiver? I think it had become Tucker Kraft, but now that he's not there, they have struggled a little bit to find that guy, and then Josh Jacobs being injured possibly this week. I think it's a big factor. Their offense has scuffled quite a bit over the last few weeks, and I think if they do that again on Sunday, this game could be a little more up in the air than we would expect it to be, at least the way that the line looks. I think the Packers are 6.5-point favorites. I think this game's closer than that if that offense struggles.
And what's the stat? They've lost like 3 or 4 games by only or when they only gave up like 17, 18, 19 points or whatever.
Been a lot of 13-10, 16-13 kind of stuff.
They lost to the Browns on that last-minute field goal early in the season.
Lost to Joe Flacco twice. Joe Flacco beat him then, and then got traded to the Bengals and almost beat them then too. Yeah. I think the offense's inconsistency has been a big storyline, but Jordan Love, watching back against the Giants, seemed to play very, very well. And I wonder how much he's getting comfortable with what he has in terms of his receiving core, because early on, like when they're good, we're used to them being a big play offense, leveraging things to Jaden Reed downfield. Christian Watson would appear from time to time. And Tucker Kraft was obviously a big catch and run guy, but also a guy who could catch passes downfield. We're not seeing that because I don't think Matthew Golden has really caught on yet as a first-round rookie. Jaden Reed was hurt early on in the year, has not been around, and then you mentioned the Kraft injury. And then they've had issues on the offensive line getting banged up as well. I think Elgton Jenkins was just placed on IR.
Yeah, I think he got hurt a couple weeks ago. I think he's done for the year.
Yikes. So, they've had some issues where I think the protection hasn't been there. I think Love hasn't seemed to have the deep play threats that he's used to having to leverage off that ground game that they're so good at coordinating and producing. So, to me, that seems to be the biggest issue with that offense, where it's like if they don't score on a 10 to 12 play drive, it doesn't seem like they're scoring touchdowns.
Yeah. And a lot of it is they've leaned on Josh Jacobs pretty heavily, and they do a lot of different things in the run game. It'll be RPOs. They've had a lot of jet sweep stuff. They've used wide receivers in their run game the last couple of years, probably more than I would have expected a Packers team to use. Certainly that's been a different wrinkle of what they've done. But, yeah, it feels like that offense is kind of trying to find its footing, especially if Josh Jacobs doesn't go in this game. And I think there was still at least some optimism on their side that he could. But if he's not full capacity, I think that changes things a lot.
Yeah, that's huge.
Well, and Jordan briefly exited the other day too.
Yeah,
did he
Malik
not? He
Willis
did come
came
in, but
Yep.
but Jordan did make an exit. So I'll be curious to see what his practice week
Yeah.
looks like as well, just in terms of how much he's going full go or if they limit him at all in that. But the other big name in this matchup that we have to flip over to, and that going into the season we didn't know was going to be a thing we would be talking about in Week 12.
I thought we'd talk about him a little later in the season.
Yeah, Micah Parsons. They would have seen him either way, I
That's
guess.
true.
But
Yeah, I've seen him
not
twice.
with the Packers. Not with the Packers. Key week again, as we said, the Vikings might have their full O-line. Micah Parsons is going to be a challenge, even if they do.
I mean, Micah Parsons is there are very few like him in the NFL in terms of a guy. You talk about a game wrecker type guy. There are very few that do it like he does, where you can move him around, and he seems like he impacts every game. He's not a guy that you forget about very often. He's typically in the backfield, getting to the quarterback. They can put him in so many different places. He's the type that you always have to know where he is, and because he is so able to rush from so many different spots, that's a harder challenge to set your protection to him. And they also have Rashawn Gary. As Kevin O'Connell said, he's probably going to be opposite Micah Parsons just about all the time. So that's another challenge for a young quarterback, possibly playing with Ryan Kelly, even if he's not, Blake Brandel in that setting. I think they will move Parsons around trying to challenge the Vikings' ability to pick things up. But he is a game-changing type player, and you see why the Packers spent what they did to get him, because they feel, too, like the Super Bowl window is open, and that's the kind of guy that maybe makes the difference.
Yeah, and watching at their defense, too, like that's obviously the strength of that group, but I think they've given up 100 rushing yards in 3 straight games. They lost 2 games before last week. Was it the Eagles and the Panthers? Right?
Yeah.
They lost at home at Lambeau Field, and they obviously they beat the Giants at MetLife last week. But watching that defense, like it's just those 2 guys on the defensive line. Without Van Ness, who was out last week, they don't have somebody on the middle who's that great.
Yeah.
John Michael Schmitz, the Gopher center who starts for the Giants, was moving guys left and right. They're starting guys named Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks in the middle.
Yep. Kenny Clark.
Devontae Wyatt does not look like a first-round pick to me, at least in the little bit that I've watched of him. So the interior of that group doesn't look that great. And it's like, to me, they got to find a way to stop Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, as you were talking about, Emily, to unleash those guys, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary. Because if you can get into 3rd and 2 or whatever, and if O'Connell can keep calling run plays, they could keep running the ball on this Green Bay defense. I don't think they're that great and solid up front to stop the run. And with the way the Vikings offensive line played on Sunday against the Bears, they were opening up lanes left and right. And if they get Ryan Kelly back, if he's playing up to speed the way that he should, they could really, I think, again, run on this Green Bay
And
defense.
O'Connell did point out after the game that calling back-to-back runs is not, what did he say? It's not typically on the menu, or like for those who have, basically, if you, he joked about it. There was a little bit
proud of himself.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a moment of self-awareness, poking fun at, I don't typically call a lot of back-to-back run plays.
Well, and I think, because I went back through after the game for the sidebar I wrote, and I think there was only 2 drives that the Vikings did not start with a run.
Correct.
On Sunday.
Yep.
So that's pretty impressive.
At least the first 5 of the game, I think, were all runs
Yeah,
on
I
first
don't
down.
think it was until you got into those couple drives right before halftime, and then obviously the one at the end where they started to stray away a little bit because they had to, because they were playing 2 minutes.
In neutral contexts, in other words, they were starting with runs pretty much every time.
Yes, yeah. So we'll see if they stick with that against the Packers. Obviously, it might be a path to success in more ways than one for them. We will be back on Friday with our typical mailbag episode. If you have questions for that, you can send them to accessvikings@startribune.com, or you can find posts asking for them on our socials and leave them there. We will also do our Vikings Flashback Friday, talking about the beginning of the 2020 season, which does include a Vikings-Packers game that was quite high scoring, a 70-point total game
That was
that I just finished watching.
Day.
So.
That was the first game of the season. We'll talk about our memories of it being one of a couple hundred people, 2 of a couple hundred people in the stadium. But
Hey, there were cardboard cutouts in the
my
They did
stands.
show them. They did show them.
let's never do that again.
Well-
We'll share our memories of it. I mean, I suppose we do have kind of an odd perspective of what that whole year was like, just having been in the stadiums for those. But yeah, we'll dust off those memories for you.
We'll talk about all of that on Friday, give you game statuses, wrap up the rest of the week of practice. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you